Welcome back to Woven by Grace. I'm so glad you're here for another episode where faith, hope, and real life challenges intersect. Whether you're joining me again or tuning in for the first time, I pray that this time together encourages your heart and strengthens your journey. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Woven by Grace. I have a special guest with me today by the name of Carol Sanchez. It's my mama, my mother. She is a certified LMSMW something licensed master social worker. So she is legally qualified to be a therapist. I get her for free, but today I wanted to have her on so we could talk about cancer, have her answer some questions. What do you want to say, Mom? Want to say hi, introduce yourself?
Yes. Well, hello, everybody. Like my daughter said, I am Carol Sanchez. I am a LMSW. I am also a supervisor for CPS, but I take much joy in working with people, trying to help people to overcome, any issues or tribulations or trauma that they may have experienced. But yes, I am here to talk to my daughter about her experience and her challenges that we have faced since her diagnosis. And yeah, here to share my thoughts and my feelings about the situation. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Excited for you to be here, Mama. Um, so we can just kind of dive in. I have a couple of questions that I pulled together. And so super informal, but of course the first one to kind of give the guests or listeners a feel is, how did you feel when you first heard about my diagnosis? Do you remember? I mean, we can talk about the second time or the first time or all together. Um, Nothing's off limits.
So, yeah, so I mean, whenever you were first diagnosed, of course, getting that information as a mother, initially you just go into a state of panic, state of, what's going to happen. Tried, of course, at the time, fear of the unknown, I think was the biggest challenge. Of course, I am a woman of faith, and through a lot of prayer at that time, just trying to navigate through my own feelings about the diagnosis. It was pretty scary, to say the least, but thankfully, through prayer, we were able to calm that down and work very hard to put it back in God's hands. But nonetheless, we're normal. We have our feelings, we have our thoughts, and the initial thoughts were that of panic and fear.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, I know my feelings, but as a parent, I can only imagine the fear. But I also know you're very faithful in your what would we say? In your God, in our God, in our faith. And so I know I leaned on you a whole lot in that time, but I always kind of try to think about your perspective and how it affected you, because I know I also needed you a lot in that time. Um, so what would you say is the hardest part of walking through this journey specifically as my mom?
So, the hardest part, of course, anytime as a parent, having to witness and, one of your children suffer, it's very, very hard. And even though people are faithful, right? Even though we know that our God is going to take care of us one way or the other, I don't know that that makes it any less scary or any less um, difficult. Yes, we lean on God, we lean on our faith, and through prayer, we ask for those miracles that we did receive. And I guess we can talk about that a little bit later. But nonetheless, it does still bring up a lot of different feelings and thoughts about seeing any of my kids suffer, not just with cancer, but at any time. A parent having to witness that, even just seeing when you would get your blood pressure, taken before your chemo treatments and seeing that your blood pressure was elevated let me know that you were nervous.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and not being able to do anything to help those nerves. I mean, I'm a ball of nerves myself, so just trying to manage through my own feelings and, you know,
Yeah, I
trying to,
definitely have white coat syndrome, as they say. And so, for you listeners, every time you go to chemo, just like you go to the doctor, they have to take your vitals. Something I learned clearly never experiencing this is they make the chemo for you fresh that day. And so they have to make sure that your body is clearly well enough to take the chemo. So, one of the number one things, the first thing they do is pull you to the back and take your blood pressure. And it never failed. I think every time, right, Mom?
yeah.
My blood pressure would be elevated, and normally my blood pressure is not elevated. Like usually they're always telling me at any other time, I have great blood pressure, which someone who doesn't know crap about medical stuff, I just trusted that they knew what they were talking about. But every time my blood pressure would be elevated, they'd have to give me some time to take a breath and cool down. And usually those were the times in which I would just kind of turn to a prayer and kind of find that peace within myself and within God to kind of relax. So yeah, I'm just a little note there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was always difficult because that just let me know that yeah, you're fixing to get chemo, which we all know is basically poison. Um,
Yeah, that
being
was.
injected and how nervous that has to be, but not only that, just the nervousness of the unknown as to what's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen. When you were going through chemo, we never really knew the outcome. We didn't know the outcome. You don't know whether the chemo's going to work or not. And so, yes, we continued to pray, but yeah, very difficult to see those things, the crying and the pain that you were going through even before we got the diagnosis. If you remember, you were in pain and going to the ER, um, not knowing what was the problem. And it wasn't until we were in the ER and that doctor that visited with you and cared for you in the ER shook my hand. I knew right then and there that it was going to be something that we were going to have to deal with. She never came out and said that it was cancer. We didn't get the diagnosis at that time, but it's the way she shook my hand and told me, that good luck with everything. I knew right then and there that there was going to be some sort of diagnosis. Just didn't know it was going to be cancer.
Yeah, that was a scary time for me too because I didn't know anything that was happening. I was waiting for such a long time. And then when I saw that doctor, she just kind of looked at me like, "Oh, nobody's told you." And I was kind of thrown off. Like, told me what? Like, what is she supposed to have told me?
Yeah.
So, with that, were there moments when you struggled with your faith? And if so, how did you find strength within that?
I don't know that I ever struggled with my faith. I think that I prayed the whole time, just like I have been, and I always will be. But I don't know that I ever struggled with my faith as much as I did just struggling with managing my own feelings and being fearful. But then again, if you think about it, I guess faith tells us not to be fearful. So if I'm being honest, that fear may have taken over, and maybe that was a struggle that I was having. I didn't doubt God in any kind of way. Uh, but I do know that I experienced many, many feelings of fearfulness and just of how I would navigate if something really, really bad happened. And I think that's where a lot of that fear was coming from. Of course, you start thinking about things as a mother, what you could have done differently. When we start thinking about mortality, whether it be ours or our children's mortality, you start getting these racing thoughts. I was a horrible mother. I was a good mother. I tried my best. What could I have done different?
Mom,
Um,
there was nothing you could do different when it comes to my cancer, though.
well, no, not when it comes to the cancer, but just in general as a parent. When you see, you think like again when you're thinking about mortality or the possibility. Now we learn. We didn't know at the onset of your cancer diagnosis that. Um, cancer treatment has definitely evolved so much. I know that there was a point in time where when you heard the big C, it was almost like that was the death sentence right away. So thankfully, medical science has evolved in a way that, these things are able to be taken care of, thankfully. But yeah, I never doubted God. I just struggled with my own feelings, I think.
In general, like with me just being sick, you mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just being fearful of that. And again, having this helpless feeling that I can't make it better. I can't, um, make the pain go away, and then of course you living in San Antonio, being in Corpus, not being able to be close enough to where, if you needed anything or just to be there, that's difficult within itself. So,
Yeah.
those kinds of things.
How do you think you balanced being strong for me while also processing like your own emotions? Was that something like a struggle, you think, or
Well, of course, through prayer and through that faith and just making sure that I, as a therapist, know, different coping skills, of course, and the things that I, you know, um, tell my clients, how to deal with stress or whatever. But for those of y'all that don't know, I was diagnosed with AFib probably approximately 3 years ago. And let me tell you, during that time, boy, my AFib was kicking. So I know that was my body telling me that I was stressed, and it is AFib can be stress induced. So I definitely had to start utilizing coping skills. Had to definitely stay in prayer, asking God not only for what we were needing and wanting with your results, but also to give me the strength to manage and to deal with my own thoughts and feelings. And so, yeah, and even though the AFib was a little off the chart during that time, we got through it. And
mm-hmm.
thankfully we did. So,
Do you think there was anything specific? I know as a Catholic you pray the rosary, but was there anything else that kind of brought you comfort, like a I don't know, a specific prayer or maybe certain I don't know, anything else besides that, or did you just find comfort in your faith in general?
yeah, definitely the rosary. As a Catholic, as a practicing Catholic, we love our Mama Mary. And we know and we believe that through her intercession, um, we can get through anything and everything. We have to remember Mother Mary and what she went through with her son. And, I remember thinking about that numerous times and talking about it and how I pulled strength through her, so definitely praying the rosary and just reminding myself that through God's strength and through his help and through Mama Mary's intercession, we can deal with anything. And
Yeah, I think I thought about that a lot, not to ever compare myself in any way to Jesus, but knowing that he was crucified on the cross and how his mother walked that journey with him. It was just really like a humbling idea, I think. Not an idea, but if his mother could do that and still support him and his choices to do that for us. Um, Not that it brought me comfort to know that you would be okay as my mother, but kind of because I know how strong your faith is.
yeah, well, and we have to remember that, God is going to give us opportunities to show our faith and to lean on Mama Mary and to lean on her intercession because again, as Catholics, we trust our mama, and uh, that has and I have to say, years ago I remember struggling with my relationship with Mother Mary, and it was a therapist that told me that sometimes when we struggle with our relationship with Mama Mary, it's because we're struggling with our own relationship with our biological mother. And I had to look into that, spiritually, to see where I was in that relationship, and a lot of healing came from that. So thankfully, I had experienced that already, because when you were going through your experience, I definitely leaned on Mother Mary, and by praying the rosary, consecrating myself to her again. And ironically, I am now the vice president of the Legion of Mary at my church. And it's been through this struggle and through this relationship that I've had with her, that has led me to that choice to be that vice president and that, for the Legion. But she has proven to me over and over that she is there to intercede for us. And it was through her relationship as well, and through the rosary, that I prayed whenever you were going through your experience. And I continue to do that now.
Yeah, makes sense. Would you say that you've learned, or what would you say, I'm sorry, that you've learned about God's grace through this experience? Did you see that through the whole journey, or was there something specific, like a certain event or moment that happened within that journey that you saw God's grace?
Well, God's grace was there throughout, right? Even with a cancer diagnosis, that doesn't mean that God's grace isn't being bestowed upon us. Diagnosis like that does not mean that we're not being loved and whatnot by God. He continues to love us no matter what. But it was the day of your surgery that, of course, I was stressed out and experiencing AFib throughout. And it wasn't until Dr. McCann came out, and, because the surgery took a lot longer than it was supposed to. So I was a bundle of nerves. I was like, okay, me, I'm anxious to begin with. And,
I think
when,
I can't remember if I told this story or not about how you and Dina got the car towed.
oh yeah, that was
We can blame it
thanks
all
to
on
Dina.
Dina.
Yeah, that was Dina's situation. That's another story for another time. But definitely the surgery was taking a lot longer than it needed. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, Lord, does that mean that something's not going on that needs to be happening? Is something happening that needs to not be happening? But finally, Dr. McCann comes out and basically says, well, we almost didn't do the surgery. And I'm like, okay, but did you do it? You've been out, you've been back there for several hours. And of course, that's when she did tell me that the surgery had been a success. However, she did say that there was a point at the beginning of the surgery where she almost chose not to do the surgery. So I'm thinking in my mind, okay, you just said you did it, so thankfully you did it. Like, how was there ever a choice not to do the surgery? Well, according to Dr. McMahon, she had
McCann.
McCann, I'm sorry. I've always wanted to call her McMahon. Dr. McCann, that in comparison to the cancer previously, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks where y'all had already done the scans and everything. She had already measured the cancer and had a game plan. So in comparison to that, to those scans, to what she saw when you were getting ready for surgery was way different. She said it was so different and so significant that she did not see a way of doing the surgery. And that technically and literally that the cancer was growing outside already. So that told me that this cancer was on fire, basically, in its growing stage. It was really rapidly growing.
Yeah, it was
And
from Dr. McCann's point of view too. She said it was very aggressive, and that was another reason why we were classifying it as stage 4, because of how fast it did grow. Um, which I don't know if that's the classifying, like if that's how they classify the aggressiveness, like how fast it grows. But I know that was her feedback to me throughout this time.
yeah, and that's what she conveyed to me as well. And so, not, in my mind, yeah, you better do this surgery. Like, there should have never been a thought that it may not have been done. But yeah, she made it very clear that the cancer had grown significantly from that time frame. And so there you have it, God's grace from the very beginning, right? The way you found out you had the cancer, that was God's work. The way it ended up being that Dr. the doctor did go ahead and do this surgery. And from what she told me, it was another colleague of hers that came in and saw the surgery that was going on, or maybe she consulted with another doctor, and that doctor helped her and told her, exactly how to do the surgery so that it would be a success. So another person stepping in, you know, all of those things that could have caused this situation to end in a much different way was all God's grace. But the thing is a lot of times people believe that God's grace is solely when you get that miracle, right? God's grace is every day, all day long, even when we're struggling or having problems or having pain or having illnesses, or when people get diagnosed with cancer. That is not lack of grace, right? We live in a world where we all know we're going to die, and we are going to suffer, and it's in that suffering that we can become closer to God. It's through that suffering. So although you suffered, and I witnessed that, and that was very difficult, I'm very thankful to God because he showed us grace, and he bestowed that grace upon us, and it only brought us closer to him. um, there's been a lot of situations in my life that didn't go the way I wanted it to, but that does not mean that there's not a God, or that he's not gracing us with his love. He graces us with his love all the time. And even through hard times or difficult times or loss or anything like that, he's still loving us and taking care of us.
Yeah, I agree. Um, Even though things didn't work out the way I wanted them to, I know that God has a bigger plan for me. And I'm trusting in that. And I think, before, I think I've spoken on how, um, on the show, how I am of faith now, and I grew up Catholic as a child. I didn't quite understand a lot of things. And this is what brought me back to God. I really wish in different circumstances that this wouldn't have had to happen to get me back to my faith. But if this is, the cross I have to carry, then I will carry it proudly, because again, I have found so much peace and um, happiness, if we want to say that word, with finding my faith again. And I think it's really put me in connection with other people that have the same values as me and feel the same way. So again, I don't want anybody to have to suffer the way that I have or did, but it's all for him, so I'll gladly do it.
Yeah, and it's through those challenges and through those trials and tribulations that he's calling us, and we lean on him more, and he will always, always show us grace no matter what the outcome may be. And that's hard, right? Because sometimes we lose people to cancer, and that's hard. But he's always, always gracing us with love, and taking care of us. So um, I think we get in a way where if things are going our way or we're blessed with things, then that equates to God's love. God's love is infinite. It's always there. Um, we just have to remind ourselves of that, and not assume that because we are blessed with certain miracles that means he loves us. He loves us regardless.
Yeah, I think it took this situation to show me that, because I think in the past I've even asked you before, sadly it's something I hate to have to admit, but I would say, well, if God exists, why is there, people who suffer? And if God exists, why are people being murdered? And why are children starving? And with this, I think it taught me so much about that part of the equation. And also, I know I've mentioned this before, how much The Chosen, the show, really brought certain things to life. So, um, I definitely can understand what you're saying there. Like, I don't see God's grace just in the good moments. I see him even in the struggles, because in that moment I'm thinking, what is God trying to teach me? What is he trying to show me here? Why is he trying to slow me down? Or, in a positive way, like what is to come out of this? And I think again with this situation and my cancer, and really what brought me to do this podcast is, that I want to help other women that maybe they're needing some sort of comfort in their journey, or maybe they've not been able to conceive their children or their child, and they can kind of find my podcast and find someone that they can relate to and know that they're not alone. And I truly believe that this is where God wants me to be. Um, Even if only one person hears it, then I'm happy to have helped that one person to get through whatever it is they're going through. So,
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes it's hard to understand why we have to go through issues and why and let me just say, I'm still growing in my faith. I think we grow daily. I think we grow until the day we die, or we at least should be thriving to or striving to grow. Um, we don't get to an age and then we figure it all out, right? God is always working in us and through us and for us. And um, as long as you keep your heart open to His word and do the action, right? It's not just about listening to God, but it's also putting work into what He wants us to do. Like, where do I belong? What am I supposed to be doing for the better of people? And maybe it is through a podcast. Maybe it is through speaking your truth and being vulnerable enough to put your experience out there to help somebody, to let them know that if they need somebody, they can contact us and just in prayer. I, we can always keep other people in prayer. Um,
it's a good
but yeah,
idea. I have opened up communication to where people wanted to talk about their experiences, but yeah, that's a great idea to open up communication and ask us to pray for you, whatever struggle you're having.
yeah. And I think sometimes people think that, oh, I have to be going to church every Sunday. Now, let me say this.
Yeah, let's pause. Let's pause.
Let me preface that comment with this is that yes, we should be going to church every Sunday. But even if you're not and you're searching for God, know that He loves you. There's we all have to take that first step, and sometimes we have to take that first step over and over and over again, right? Um, just because I go to church every Sunday does not mean I know everything. It does not mean I'm perfect in any way. I go to church on Sunday because I'm not. But no matter where you are in your faith journey, no matter where you are with your prayer life, and even if you've been mad at God because you've had so many trials and tribulations, it's okay. It's okay to ask for prayer. It's okay to start praying. And, prayer is just a conversation you're having with God. It is not something formal that you have to do. Now, as Catholics, we do have a slew of prayers that we pray. I think you can have a prayer for just about anything. But I think my best prayer is when I just get into my heart and into my mind and I just meditate and talk to Him and just say, "Look, Lord, I'm suffering right now." I did a lot of that when you were going through cancer and through treatment, but honestly, as a parent, I've been going through that since the day your brothers were born. you know so being a parent's not easy. We have those joyous moments and we love our children, but with being a parent comes worry and concern, and that doesn't stop because a child turns 18. That doesn't stop because they move out of your home. That will continue probably until the day I die. It gets a lot easier with God, and it gets a lot easier with prayer. I did have to be reminded that you all are His children. I was blessed to be able to raise y'all here on earth, but y'all are His. And I remember praying that and saying to Him that I'm sorry that I got so full of myself to believe that they were mine, and had to be reminded that y'all are His. And He will carry y'all through. As a parent, have made many, many mistakes, uh, but it's through God's grace and through His reminding me that y'all are His children. And whatever He has chosen for y'all to go through, I will go through it with y'all. and know that this is his what he wants us to go through, and we'll gladly do it, whatever it may be.
Yeah, for sure. Um, to go back to that, I think that was a really hard time for me, and I think I've been very vulnerable with you to express like when I first found things out and how much I was suffering mentally, and it's gonna make me cry, but I kind of get sad thinking about how mad I was with God. And especially knowing now like how I feel and how strong I am in my faith, it's really hard to admit how mad I was with him. Um
Yeah.
that I
Well,
had to suffer, and not even the suffering, because I think I would take all the suffering every day if it meant I could have my children. Um that was the hardest part. But
yeah, yeah, and that's the thing, I can't really think of a time where I've been angry with God, um, because I know it was through my choices that things had happened. Some things in life are consequences to our choices. Let's start there, right? Now, not being able to conceive a child and getting a cancer diagnosis, we know that it's not uh, because of any action that you may have had. Um, but the beautiful thing is how loving and forgiving God really is. You know, um, there's no possible way here on earth that we will ever understand his love for us. I think we would be overwhelmed with that knowledge, but but he does. He loves us so much. And again, we're never going to be able to understand that amount of love. And so it's through that understanding that we have to remind ourselves that whatever may come our way, he still loves us, no matter how many times we get angry at him, no matter how many times we blame him, or we forget about him, right? Some people, things get better and they get the blessing that they ask for, and the first one sometimes that we forget about is our Lord and Savior. So
I think now though, as I've become closer with God and I truly do feel that he is, my eternal father now, that's a separate conversation about the real relationship I have with my father, but I see him now as this parent, father figure, uh, and just as much as you get on my nerves and you make me upset and I get angry with you, we work it out, we talk about it, whatever. I mean, we don't ever have arguments like that, but I think that is what it took for me to kind of um make sense of it. Like I get upset with you and you're my earth mom. So as much guilt as I carried, I think I needed to understand that again, that it's okay. Um ask for forgiveness and understand that there's a reason and purpose for everything that happens, and I don't think it's hindered our relationship or my faith with him or my love for him. It's just something I had to process and go through during that time.
yeah, and that just shows your faith, right? To know that, we do make mistakes, we do get angry, and to know that he still loves us and that he forgives us, and all we have to do is repent for those sins. Absolutely, and that's the beautiful thing about faith, is knowing that, right?
Hmm.
But unfortunately, we've got to go through a lot of trials and tribulations before we get to that point. And it's like any other relationship. You have to put the work in, you have to pray, you have to do the actions, you have to do what God tells us to do, we have to read the Bible, we have to do all those things. And it's through those things that he will open our heart, and we will hear him, and we will understand what it is he wants for us and from us. So yeah, you have to work on that relationship with him, just like you have to work on any relationship that you may be in.
Yeah, no, for sure. Something my pastor said recently, I don't know if we talked about it, but he said that that wounds build walls. And something so simple was so impactful for me because it resonated within this situation, with personal relationship with other people, relationship with my father, how specific things of being hurt really did put this wall up in me emotionally, within my heart. and it also reminded me that I need to give forgiveness a little bit more, and understanding that just as I have these wounds, other people have wounds as well. And I'm so thankful to God that I can process those things, because I don't think others are able to process that and understand that their trauma really causes the way they handle their relationships. I don't know if that makes sense in your world, really, like in your job, but for me, it just made so much sense to think through that. And really, again, in the situation of being angry at God, that's really why, because I was so hurt, I was so upset, and it just put this wall up in me with a lot of people, not just God. I think I shut myself out so much to people because I was just in a very dark place. Um, but again, I'm happy to have overcome that. And
Yeah, well, I mean, anger is in the therapy world, anger is a secondary emotion, right? You know, it's so much easier to be angry than it is to be vulnerable. And it's through that anger we build those walls. It's through that anger that we shut ourselves down. It's through that anger that we take ourselves away from relationships. Yeah, so any relationship, whether it's with a parent, a brother, a sister, any relationship, there's some vulnerability that has to be had. And
yeah,
it's the same thing with our relationship with God, being vulnerable and just giving everything back to him. You know, we try to be in control of things. Most of us do anyway. And when we're not in control, that's scary. That vulnerable feeling is very scary. You know, especially when it comes to a cancer diagnosis or when we're thinking of mortality or death, right? You know, what can we learn from that? What can we get from that, and how does that bridge our relationship with God, right? And it takes work, and it takes a lot of soul searching. It takes a lot of prayer, takes a lot of insight into what our issues are, because we are affected by our trauma. We all know that. Anybody that experiences any kind of trauma, we are affected by those things. And so, yeah, a lot of people have those feelings. If there was a God, then why did this happen? Or if there was really a God, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, you know, if we don't experience bad, how do we know what good is? We always had good. How do we show God that we're willing to go through that desert with him? Like right now, we know we're in Lent season and we're in the desert right now. Just like Jesus went into the desert and prayed for 40 days before he was crucified. During Lent, we go into the desert and we pray and we fast, and we're reminded that we are going to die. And what we do here on earth is what matters. Our job here on earth is to get to heaven. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. You know, the hustle and bustle of every day is, got to go to work, got to do this, got to do that. How much time do we really spend working on our relationships, working on that relationship with God? How much time do we really spend doing for others as he's asked us to do? So, yeah, and when we're in that desert, finding somebody to talk to or finding a good church to be a part of, that's so important, no matter, what church you go to. Again, I am, faithful Catholic and practicing Catholic. But and it's not a matter of what church you go to. We had that discussion. I would prefer that my children be in a Catholic church, but as long as you're working on your relationship with God, that's what's important to me. Of course, you were baptized a Catholic in the Catholic Church. Once you're baptized a
oh
Catholic,
gosh,
you're always a Catholic.
let's not get
But we
on
can have
this
that
tangent.
conversation
No, that's all
another
right.
day.
Yeah,
But what's beautiful is that we both serve the same God, and
we do.
uh, we have both been blessed with grace many, many times over. I could sit here and tell you many, many times that God has blessed me beyond my deserving, but I'm so grateful to God for those blessings and for every trial we've been through, every tribulation we have been through. We've accepted it. We carry that cross with grace, and we carry it for him.
Yeah. Um, I think to go back to 5 minutes ago when you first started rambling,
Yes, I do that.
guys, I if I don't stop her, she'll keep going. But I think that was a true struggle for me is the control of things. As the oldest of your children, I I think this is something of you too. Like I need to be in control, and with cancer and especially during chemo, I had to pretty much let all that go. I had no control. I mean, yes, I knew what day to come to treatment, but in that moment, I didn't know how my body reacted to the last treatment. I didn't know if I was going to have to, there was a time, I don't know if you remember, when they almost didn't let me take a treatment because they were worried about how the last chemo impacted my body. And then during chemo, of course, my thyroid stops working and now my sugars are super elevated. And these are all new things that were happening to me. And it was just completely scary to not have this control of what was going on in my body and really just kind of handing it over to God. Like, I really, I don't even know at what point it was, but I just said, it is your will. And if I am meant to survive, it will happen by you, through you. Now I wasn't just, throwing the towel and I'm ready to die, but I think at some point in time, because of the loss of my grandma and just now having the faith that I had, it was one of these things where I wasn't so scared anymore, but it was still really hard to let go of the fear of not having control, which makes no sense because I couldn't let go of the control, but I also was like, okay, whatever happens, happens. And if, I don't make it, I don't make it, which sounds really crazy again. But that was something I had to really, I think, work through and adjust myself and my personality because it was a difficult thing, I think.
Yeah, and as a mother, right, we try to control things too, but I learned a long time ago that we're not in control of anything. And it is just through prayer that I've learned that the more you try to control things, the harder your life is going to be. Seriously, we don't control anything, right? You know, we could be gone tomorrow,
Hmm.
right? So we just supposed to enjoy what we've been blessed with and the time that we've been blessed with our family and with each other. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah, I think I
control is definitely uh, such a waste of time when you think about it, trying to
I will have
control
to
things.
remind you of that in the next few
Yeah, well, I
situations
mean,
where
I've let go a lot. I know that, you know, when you're a parent and you're a single parent at times, you think the more, again, control is an illusion, right? The more you think you're in control, the better you think you have a handle on things. And it's so ironic in that there was a moment in my life where that poem Footprints really made an impact in my life. I've seen that poem many, many times as a young kid, as a teenager, and even as a young adult. But I had an epiphany, and I don't remember exactly when it was.
I didn't know
But
they had printed images when you
yes,
were
they
a
had
kid.
printed
I
images.
wasn't sure. I
Believe it or
didn't know
not,
if it
they
was
did.
on tablets with with
Yeah, no,
stones
it might have
imprinted.
been on a stone somewhere. I'm not quite sure where I read it, but somewhere. And I remember seeing that poem after going through a very, very hard time in my life, and it made sense to me. That is when it hit me that all through those trials that he was carrying me. You know, people have always said, you know, oh, Carol, you've been through so much. You're such a strong person. And I'm like, yeah, that's such an illusion. Uh, there's nobody has strength without God. And it is that strength, his strength, that got me through those things, that got you through those things, you know, with this cancer diagnosis and with these treatments and all that. People say, oh, you know, go in and fight the fight. And they were a good fighter. And I think most of the time that's through faith.
Yeah, I think that was a hard. I would tell you all the time going through my cancer, and I have to take a step back and understand like the people in my life, them wanting to be there but not knowing what to say. I know we've probably all been in that scenario where somebody's lost someone or again they're going through cancer and you want to be there, but you sometimes struggle with what to say exactly, because if you've never been through cancer, you don't know what that's like. And having people tell me, stay strong, like, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because during chemo, I mean, I would try to play it off how much I was hurting, but it's really hard mentally to quote unquote stay strong when your whole body hurts, when your bones literally hurt, when your muscles ache, when my scalp hurt from losing my hair. It was just really hard to say stay strong, again, but understanding that even though people don't have the right thing to say, their intentions are good. And that was really a struggle for me. I think I would express that to you, like, not necessarily don't say anything at all. And definitely now I feel differently about it, but during that time it was just really, really hard to accept people's emotions, or mm, I don't know what you would say there, but
Yeah. Well, and I think too, stay strong puts puts the responsibility back on you, like you had a choice, right? Your
yeah.
body's going to do what your body's going to do. I think we need to, maybe rephrase some things. And sometimes it is hard to know what to say. It's kind of like when somebody that you're close to and they have a family member pass away or something. I always tell people it's not a matter of what you say, it's a matter of what you do. Hey, I'm here for you. You let me know what you need from me, but just know I'm here. Because sometimes finding the right words to say to somebody that's going through cancer is hard. Like, what do you say? Um, but yeah, I think when as a cancer patient, when you hear "stay strong," well, it's not like I have a choice. This poison is kind of bringing me down, and then I'm sure feeling guilty when you did suffer through it, as if you had a choice to stay strong,
Yeah.
right? So,
I think something to note too, though, as a listener, I think something I would offer if you've ever been in that situation is, and it's really changed how I show up for people, but you simply stating sometimes, "Hey, I'm here for you." It's very appreciated, but sometimes taking the next step and actually showing up without being asked, because I will say as many times as I had somebody tell me, "Oh, I'm here for you," it takes a big ask to actually be so vulnerable to say, like, hey, I actually need you, especially in those moments. And maybe that's a me thing, maybe everybody's not like that, but yes, offer that, hey, I'm here for you, but let me actually do that with my actions, whether that's showing up with a meal, whether that's showing up with a book, or hey, let me come and sit with you for a little bit. It's those little actions, I think, sometimes that speak a lot more volume than just sending a text and saying, "Hey, I'm here for you."
yeah.
And I mean, that's not to negate from the emotion that's behind that text, right? And I'm not even trying to be negative here. It's just simply sometimes stepping outside of that box and doing a little bit more than just the text, because it is hard. For me personally, yeah, there was many days where I felt lonely and like nobody understood me, and it was hard to talk to people that didn't understand that, because how do you complain about something that these other people haven't gone through? And then also being strong enough to say that, I don't want to complain, I don't want to think negatively. So it's a very hard emotional and mental place to be at. So I think if you have someone going through that, just think outside the box of how can you do a little bit more than just, hey, send a text and I'm here for you.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you're saying, be about that action or be about that and show up versus just a text. Yeah. And I can see that, um, I can see that.
Again, I mean, it's not taken away from the text, right? Because I understand the text in itself takes an action, but for me, again, I had to kind of think on that, because I've done that before. I've sent a text, hey, I'm here for you. And then you wonder why during that time they don't ever reach out. Well, just thinking through that, like, it is really hard to be that vulnerable and actually say, hey, I really do need you right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course. Especially when you don't even know what you need, right? Because I know there
Mm-hmm.
was times you're like, I don't even know what I need. Like, I just want to feel better. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so that can be difficult too. So I get that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is hard. It's hard on the patient. It's hard on the family members. It's hard on even the friends to see because again, most people, I would imagine, I know me myself is, I went straight to, okay, what if I lose her? So, but like I said earlier, people that are getting diagnosed with cancer, thankfully, the medical field, the medical science has
Well, hold
evolved
up,
so much.
Mom. Did you really think that there was a part that you could lose me?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, again, when you hear cancer, you know, um, you got to remember cancer back in the 80s, 90s, it was pretty much a death sentence, unfortunately. And when you don't really understand the medical field and what's going on, you don't know that, okay, there's options. And I think the first time I felt a little bit better was when the doctor, I think it was maybe the first chemo session you had, was like, okay, you're not going to be a pillow princess through this. You're going to get up and we want you to move. Cancer is not cancer treatment anyway.
I was hoping I could be a pillow princess, which
Yeah.
granted, the term
Yeah.
is
The doctor's
used really
like,
loosely, but
yeah,
I was
no.
thinking I've always had to take care of everybody. Can I be pampered for a minute? But
Yeah, but she
they
was
didn't let
like,
that
no,
happen.
no, you're not going to do that. You're going to get up. You're going to keep doing what you need to do to the best of your ability and as long as your body would let you. And I'm like, well, that's kind of cruel. Like, no, let her sleep, let her, but I understand now, right? Because there are some things that the patient needs to do to help themselves through these chemo sessions and all that good stuff. And because the medical field has evolved so much that there was always that hope with the doctors and that understanding that we can beat this. But absolutely anytime any one of y'all would get a cold, it would always go to the extreme, especially with me. I would go very, very extreme anytime any of y'all got sick, and the worry.
And I think now, sadly, we've talked about this before. Anytime we're sick now, it just goes. And I think it's gotten a little bit better, but I think my mom has been kind of scarred in the sense of like, oh, you have a cough. Like, what if it's, uh, I don't even know, a black spot in your lung and
Oh
your
yeah.
lung is going to collapse and then you're going to be in the hospital. And again, I know and I've seen it where she does go to the extreme, although again, I think it's gotten better, but
Well,
during
that
that
comes,
time it was
yeah, that comes with knowledge of things, right? Like when I'm in,
knowledge.
yes, knowledge. That
I
comes.
don't know if this is mom knowledge or her education
This
because
is just me.
mom says she knows everything and you can't go against what mom
Well,
says.
this is just more like, okay, my son smokes cigarettes. I now know that cigarettes is bad for you, right? Not that I didn't know that early on, but now I see that. And of course, I see them smoking. Now one of my kids has had cancer. Now, oh my goodness, right?
Oh
And
my
so I
goodness.
have to be reminded and I have to remind myself, Lord, please, and I pray for them. But yeah, of course. Sometimes when you don't have anybody in your family that's been diagnosed with cancer, that's something other families have to deal with. When it is in your home and it is one of your children, then yes, we now know that we are not invincible. And it's a very, very uh,
Humbling.
humbling experience, but
Yeah.
also a very big reminder that we are going to die. We live our
Mm.
lives thinking we're invincible, and we hear it all the time. We're going to die. We're going to die. But, we think, oh, we're young. We don't die until we're 80 or 90. No, that's not the way life works. And that's just a reminder. And so, yes, it has gotten better. I had to give y'all back to God, and I had to remind myself that I'm not in control, like I said earlier, and then only He is. And whatever His will may be, that I will gracefully accept it, and I will put all my faith in Him.
Yeah, I think it hit me when I was at the doctor and she pretty much, gave me my results. This was before chemo started. And, she had always asked me to trust her. And she said, I will tell you when it's time. And that day she told me it's time. And I knew what that meant. But then she even told me further, like, do you have a will? And I remember not only was I shocked by the things that were being said, but then to think like, why do I need to prepare myself that way? And she said, it might be time to get your things in order, make sure, in her way, she said basically your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. And I don't think I was able in that moment to even comprehend that because I was just so kind of like shocked with the whole, oh, it's time to have a hysterectomy. Not only that, she said, okay, the type of chemo you're going to have is your hair is going to fall out. And sadly, thinking back, that was the thing that hurt me the most was me losing my hair. It was a scary thing because I knew at that time, like, oh my gosh, this is serious. And then again, the talk of death and preparing myself, like, I didn't know how to process that. So I think from that point on, I knew it was always a possibility. But again, I wasn't scared. I just kind of said, okay, if it is your will, it is, I am yours. And if this is my time, then I trust you. But it was scary. I can't say it wasn't because it definitely was.
Yeah, when you have a doctor saying, hey, you might need to write up your will, of course, ain't nobody trying to hear all that, doc. No, well, hold on now.
Uh-oh. This is mom coming out. This is
Yeah,
not therapist Carol Sanchez.
this is gangster coming back out because ain't nobody trying to hear nothing about no
She,
will.
she's a Jesus gangster.
Yes, I am. But yeah, when you hear that from a doctor,
the God.
that's right. That's right. But when you hear, a will, well, yeah, we ain't having all that. We're
No.
not ready for that. So, but yeah, definitely scary. Definitely a lot of emotions from anger to just pure, I give up to you, Lord. I give it all back to you. And like I said, through many AFib episodes, it was all okay, and even through that, through that struggle of AFib, right? Hey, Lord, it is your will. Let your will be done, and we're gonna be all right. We're gonna get through it
Yeah.
because we have to remind ourselves the glory that comes, the glory that comes after.
Yeah. Well, we can start to wrap up. I just had a couple more questions. Um, is there something that you would offer to parents that are walking alongside a child facing a serious illness like cancer or um, any other type of major illness that a child would have? Is there any type of encouragement that you would give parents from your experience that you can offer?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, prayer, of course, and just walking that walk of faith and reminding ourselves and reminding yourself that He is there, that a cancer diagnosis or a medical diagnosis that does not mean that He's not there, as hard as it is. And I don't mean to minimize anybody's thoughts or feelings about what they're experiencing or that it's just that easy, because I know it's not. But just also, even though the struggle is hard, it is to remain in the moment, to remain present and to remain in the moment, and to surround yourself with family and friends because you need to take care of yourself as well. I see so many parents that have children that are ill or going through things. I mentioned I'm a CPS supervisor, and it becomes very, very difficult. So self-care is very, very important. I'm sure y'all have always heard the cliche, you can't give away what you don't have. And it's definitely true.
You can't
But
pour from an empty cup.
that's it. And to keep the faith, like I said, but always take care of yourself. I think I've seen parents where they feel guilty for taking care of themselves when they're seeing their child suffering the way they do. Um, but sometimes we have to just be still and take care of yourselves as best as you can and reach out to
Mhm.
people.
Yeah, that's a good ending point. like my mom said, we will open up the emails, wovenbygracepodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to send us your story, if you want us to pray for you, I would love to pray for you. I know my mom would love to pray for you. We would love to pray for you. Um, I'm thankful that you were able to come and talk with me, Mom. I appreciate your vulnerability and your honesty here. I always appreciate your point of view. And on that, we will talk next time.
Fantastic.